Are women musicians inferior? For most of the 20th century, any of the big U.S. orchestras would have said that men were better musicians than women because only about 5% of the players were females. In the 1960s, they made a change with the auditions by having the musicians audition behind a screen. The hiring of women musicians rose dramatically. Before the blind auditions, the committee members were biased. Bias occurs everywhere. What constitutes a science? Science is a way of looking at the world to make sense of what we see. We go through a scientific process. First, we observe and carefully measure the events that have caught our interest, such as behaviors. Then we look at variables. Variables are events in the environment or other behaviors that often change along with the behavior of interest. Next, we come up with a hypothesis to explain why those variables and the behavior might vary. Then we devise experiments to prove as many of these explanations as we can. Lastly, we form a theory which can provoke another set of hypotheses to be tested. All science begins with observations. Observations are the careful noting and recording of events that occur over time. A descriptive method is making observations with the goal of accurately and impartially describing behaviors with any attempt to influence them. There are 3 methods used in descriptive studies: case studies, surveys, and naturalistic observation. A case study is a careful, intensive observation of one or few individuals, typically people who display a particular behavior. They include face-to-face interviews. Survey is a means of gathering data about behavior by having people answer questions about their behavior, thoughts, or opinions. An advantage of surveys is the ability to gather information from many people in a short amount of time. However, a disadvantage of surveys is that there may be a difference between what people report about their behavior and how they accurately behave. A naturalistic observation is a descriptive study of behavior of a species in its natural environment. The behavior is real life and not something that only happens in a laboratory. We can measure how closely 2 variables vary together. Covary means to vary together in a predictable fashion, generally said of 2 variables. Correlation coefficient is a quantitative measurement of how closely 2 variables fluctuate together. We have positive correlation and negative correlation. Positive correlation is when the variables tend to go up and down together, and a negative correlation is if one variable goes up, the other goes down.